The meeting now, the CSLB Enforcement Committee meeting, February 20th, 2015, will now come to order. I'm going to first call the roll. Bob Lamb, Chair, I'm here. Kevin Abdelaze.
Albanese here.
Albanese. Pastor Herrera.
Here.
John O'Rourke. Frank Shetter.
Here.
Okay, we'll go ahead and move on. Commence the enforcement meeting. Again, Bob Lamb, the Enforcement Chair. You're already at order. Only board members who are members of the committee may sit at the table. Other board members who are in attendance must observe from the audience. If a quorum of the board is present, those members who are observing cannot participate in the discussion. Okay, we're going to dispense with the introductions because we have a full house today. So we're going to move on. CSLB retired annuitant Doug Galbraith and Deputy Attorney General Mike Franklin completed a third enforcement academy. Instruction was provided on ethics, investigative techniques, evidence phone tactics, time management, interview techniques, report writing, court testimony, and construction-related codes. I'd like to thank Board Member Ed Lang and Registrar Sidney Christensen for taking time out of their busy schedules to present the graduation certificates to staff. I know the staff really appreciate it. And I've had the honor to do that myself, and it is really, really worth going to if you ever get a chance. As a board member, it really is really worthwhile. On February 14th through 16th, CSLB enforcement staff manned a local assistance center set up in Mammoth Lakes by the Governor's Office of Emergency Services for victims of the Round Fire. The wildfire broke out on February 6th and destroyed 40 residences, outbuildings, and damaged 5 other residences. Unfortunately, there were no serious injuries. In addition to meeting with fire victims at the local assistance center, CSLB staff went into the fire zone and met with victims on their properties. CSLB staff gave victims information about hiring licensed contractors to rebuild or repair their homes, as well as warning not to hire unlicensed contractors looking for work. Staff also provided license application information to at least 2 people interested in becoming licensed contractors. I am pleased to learn the staff are coordinating future enforcement efforts with the Department of Insurance. Okay, we're going to move on to agenda item B, public comment session. This item is provided for public comment pertaining to items on the agenda as well as items not on the agenda. However, the committee cannot take any action on items not listed on the agenda. Are there any individuals that wish to address the committee at this time? Please state your name for the record, sir.
Hi, Larry Rolfus, California Landscape Contractors Association. And I would just like to express our appreciation to the board for allowing an enforcement staffer to speak to native Spanish speakers at our convention in Ontario on November 5th. She did this on very short notice because the scheduled speaker, Eddie Rodriguez, had an emergency, couldn't come. And so we didn't ask her to do it in Spanish because she had 0 time to prepare, and provided a couple translators for her. And it went really well. It was unscripted, but a lot of good information was presented. But more important than that was the Spanish-speaking individuals in the audience, and there were about 15 of them, really appreciated it. They were very thankful to our association and to the CSLB for doing this. And it's something that with the construction industry, the future of the construction industry is the Hispanic demographic is going to be a very, very big part of that. And this type of thing, we all might consider doing it more often. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Are there any other public comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to agenda item C, recognition of enforcement partners. It is my pleasure to now recognize the following law enforcement partners. I'd like to call up Amy Poehler first. Is Amy here? Amy's not here. Okay, we'll move on. Amy Poehler, Paul Hildegast, Tom Sage, and Jim Walshaw. Come forward. Tom Sage. Should I read this too? This back there? Yeah, this back. Okay. Okay, Tom Sage. Tom is the Chief District Attorney Investigator for Amador County. Tom has worked with CSLB for years and has served as a model for working with other DAs. Tom is always respectful, professional, and available 24/7. Sounds like a lot of people I know, but not many that are good, like you. We appreciate our superior working relationship with his office. His staff assists ours with many stings, sweep operations, and leads. Jim Walshaw. Jim reports to Tom as an Amador County District Attorney Investigator. Jim also is committed to CSLB Consumer Protection Mission, has been instrumental in working with the building departments and enforcing workers' compensation insurance requirements. Jim, too, is consistently available to assist CSLB in our mission to fight the underground economy. Paul Hildegas. Paul is the Yolo County District Attorney Investigator who handles workers' comp claims. We have a long-standing partnership with Yolo County, and he too is always available to assist us in sting operations and sweeps. We're grateful for our solid and reciprocal relationship with the Yolo County DA's office and Paul in particular. Don't leave without. Appreciate you. All right, thank you. Yeah, we should. Okay.
Would you mind just reading this?
Oh. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and read Amy.
David Long is here also.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and read Amy Pollard's right now. Amy Pollard is a joint enforcement agent with the Employment Development Department assigned to work with CSLB under the Joint Enforcement Strike Force umbrella. Amy is consistently ready, willing, and able to respond to a request from CSLB. She's extremely committed to protecting contractors, playing by the rules in the construction industry, and has been described as tenacious. Some of you may think Jeff Miller aggressively enforces the law, which is true. However, it is my understanding that Jeff appears docile when he's compared to Amy. And Jeff mentioned that. And if Jeff said it, boy, that is high praise, because Jeff is an absolute bulldog. I'd hate to see what Amy was like on an investigation. Wow, that's something to say right there. So we will present her certificate to her here in a little bit. Okay, so we'll go ahead and move on. Agenda item D, enforcement program update. Chief David Foat will now provide the enforcement program update.
Thank you, Mr.
Chief
Lamb.
Foat.
One of the primary focuses of the meeting today is on our leveraging of resources with building departments. And if you'll turn to page 1 in the update, I want to just quickly provide you some information on the success that our intake mediation center staff have recently. They routinely have in settling complaints. There's 2 highlights. One is an elderly consumer that had a contractor that was showing lack of diligence. We were able to intervene and were able to complete about $4,200 worth of work. Not a lot of work left to be done, not all that significant. But the second one at the bottom of the page, a little more significant. We got a 23-year-old consumer that responded to a knock on her door, and she ended up entering into 3 separate contracts that totaled $78,000. And in looking at the complaint, we determined that $53,000 of the money paid was for unnecessary work. Through the mediation efforts of the Consumer Services representative, $45,000 was returned. But what's important to recognize here is we have a protected class of consumers, and elderly are included in that we do focus our enforcement efforts on. Very pleased today that we have quite a few of our peace officers throughout the state that are in attendance, and that's been one of their focuses. So while we may settle a complaint with restitution paid, this complaint was forwarded to a peace officer for further investigation, and that's done routinely. On page 1, 2, and 3 of the packet, you'll find highlights that relate to permit complaints. And the board previously approved reclassifying 2 positions, 2 consumer services positions to enforcement rep to work permit related complaints and handle those within 60 days. Just want to touch on a couple of the highlights. It lends itself to the presentation that will close out our enforcement committee today. We have a Woodland Contractor. Kind of interesting that if we have a good, strong working relationship with the building department, we not only want to address the permits that are not obtained or a contractor not obtaining a permit, but also the contractors that obtain permits that do not receive final inspection. That's a problem with the heating and air conditioning industry. They'll get a permit, but they don't want to get the system tested. They don't obtain the final inspection. That is a violation of the building code. It's something we can embrace and take action on. We were able to help the Woodland Building Department and achieve compliance with an HVAC contractor. We have a Tuolumne County contractor that was routinely failing to obtain permits, and when that happens, we'll generally bring the contractor in. We'll explain the need for a building permit, that you've got to obtain them in the future. We do use progressive discipline at our intake mediation center, and that we're trying to gain future compliance. We may issue a warning letter the first time we have a violation if they return to obtain the permit, but if the acts are repeated, then a citation will be issued. I thought it was kind of interesting. We have a highlight relating to another HVAC contractor who, when confronted with the need for a permit, he said that his employees were dropped off at the job site to verify somebody else had done the work. Well, we didn't buy that, so he did need to return, obtain a permit, get the job done, but because he wasn't truthful in what he had performed and because of prior complaint activity, a citation was issued to that contractor. On page 2, we have a summary of the complaints that have been received in 2014. I think it's kind of interesting in that we received 258 complaints. We issued 46 citations. It really attests to the ability to get a contractor to return to perform any work necessary to comply with the code and comply with those code requirements. And with that, if we could turn to page 4. What we have are new and improved statistical reporting, and we've gone to a line chart, and it has a little more detail. What you'll see is that our complaint handling capacity is roughly 3,000 complaints. We're slightly over that with 3,100 open complaints, but we're still right where we want to be as far as our pending assignments for our investigators and our consumer services representatives. But I hope you take an opportunity to look at the charts that are in this packet and also the description of what we're measuring. And what you'll find is that we are achieving the board's goals of the investigative center investigators moving 10 or more complaints each, that we're keeping our cycle times down to record lows. The statutory requirement is that we complete investigations, the more complex ones, within 1 year. But the board objective is to close all but 100 of our open cases within 9 months. And you'll see that in January we had a record low of only 42 complaints out of more than 3,000 open that exceeded 9 months in age. We're very pleased about that. On page 7, this is something else the board has instructed us to pursue, and that's working more closely with prosecutors, and specifically those prosecutors that address the consumer harm violations that occur in so many of our complaints. And what you'll see is that out of the approximately 900 legal actions, 29 or actually 30% of them were referred to a DA. And we're very pleased with that and the ability and the diligence that the staff are showing in putting those cases together so that criminal charges are filed when appropriate. But having said that, we still have a focus on settling complaints whenever possible. With the licensee complaints, we're achieving the 70% goal of dispositioning those complaints without taking a legal action. And I missed it, but I want to just comment that on page 4, we had approximately $7 million returned to injured consumers July through January. So we, again, are continuing to prioritize our resources to handle complaints quickly, bring value to the license, settle the complaints if possible within 60 days. For those that are more egregious, we use administrative action to gain compliance, and when necessary, we're making the referrals to the DA. On page 8, this is a new chart that we just developed for this committee meeting, and that's the weighted SWIFT closing average. I mentioned the investigative centers. The investigators are, their goal, that's really what it is, just a goal of closing 10 complaints on average. For the SWIFT unit, our statewide investigative fraud team, it's 13. And it's very impressive that if you look at the bottom of page 8, you'll see that 50% of the legal actions they're taking are referred to the DAs. So 50% administrative, 50% criminal, and their primary focus is on contractors that are unlicensed. They're doing work, requires a license, they don't have one, or they've got workers and they do not have a workers' compensation policy. And on page 10, I wanted to just quickly cover a couple of highlights. And what we've included here are highlights that relate to the fine work that our peace officers have been performing. We have Joe Henry Peterson. He has a long history of victimizing the elderly on construction projects. He's not licensed. He may or may not use a license number belonging to someone else, but he's been a repeat offender, been a tremendous problem, and we included this highlight because, as many of you know, we have very strong working relationships with the Riverside and San Diego DA's office. They both played a vital part in achieving a 9-year state prison sentence. Now, what's a little disturbing about the highlight is that we didn't find out about this as timely as we would have hoped. And one of our strategic objectives that we will hopefully present at a future board meeting would be to develop a more close working relationship with the Superior Court system so that we find out about convictions and the outcomes of our referrals a little more timely. On page 11, I just want to provide a quick update regarding Raj and Tori Suri. They operated what we call the Palladium Group. That was the one that were purchasing these walk-in bathtubs, and under Greenworks US, they were installing them. They had a silent qualifier. They had no knowledge of what was going on, and they victimized thousands of consumers in the state of California. A real problem. As you may know, that they were both arrested. They spent 12 days in jail. They're now facing over 60 felony counts each. And I would just want the committee to know that we're continuing the investigation into other individuals that we believe are also culpable. On page 15, we provide just a quick update on electrician certification. At the last board meeting, we did discuss electrician certification and the Attorney General letter, for lack of a better term, that stated that the roadway appellate court decision was not binding on the contractor's board and how we enforce the law. We agreed to discuss that further at the meeting today. I've had the pleasure of discussing this with Frank Shetter and other stakeholders, and what we've worked out is that we are stepping up enforcement of the electrician certification requirement. I have met with supervisors and other staff to emphasize the need to make sure that we're investigating a complaint filed against a C10 electrical contractor, that we are addressing that violation. And we're going to continue to work with industry to fine-tune our investigative approach. And to close out the update, I just wanted to share some good information regarding the Enforcement Academy. We did, as Bob mentioned, Mr. Lamb mentioned last week, conclude our 3rd Enforcement Academy. More than 80% of our investigative staff or enforcement staff have attended the 5-day academy. And what we're now doing is we're developing advanced enforcement courses, and you'll see them listed at the bottom of page 17. That concludes the enforcement update. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for David or any public comment on this agenda item?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I was looking at the training update, and you know, I'm really impressed with the type of training that you're doing. And I was just thinking concerning your entry level, I guess they're the consumer services representatives. You know, I would think that many of them probably are not specialists in the construction industry. So are you giving them some type of special training so that they can become familiar with the do's and don'ts and all the things that they should be looking for as far as, you know, when they do an investigation or they speak to the contractor so they can better mediate or maybe try to find a resolution for their complaints?
We have had industry representatives come in and meet with staff, but we should consider a more formalized approach. I think that's a very good idea.
Yeah, because you have an excellent program for your staff here, and I'm sure you're trying to really, work with, as your consumers come in, they complain. I mean, I feel terrible when I read these stories about all these people being ripped off, and it might give them some. I mean, the training for your people on the front lines might be beneficial. That's just a thought. Okay.
No, thank you. We will add that to our training curriculum.
Okay, are there any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, if I might, could we specifically ask the gentleman on the phone if this is the item that he wanted to comment on? Sir, on the phone there, you wish to comment on this issue? Hello?
It's on. It's on. Hello? Is anyone there?
Okay.
Okay, we'll go ahead and move on then. They hang up, we move on. Okay, we'll go ahead and go to agenda item E, review and discussion of CSLB partnering with other state agencies. Deputy Chief Christina Delp has been working closely with partnering state agency. Ms. Delp, would you please provide an update regarding your meeting with the Department of Industrial Relations and the Labor Enforcement Task Force, please?
Sure. Our statewide investigative fraud team, otherwise known as SWIFT, participates in two task force efforts with our partnering agencies that combat illegal activity. One is the Joint Enforcement Strike Force that's administered by the Employment Development Department, and it primarily focuses on taking criminal action against violations for license, tax, workers' comp activity that you see on job sites. It's when we partner with these agencies, it's not a structured sweep setting. Staff goes out when resources are available, and it's conducted throughout the year. The difference between JESIF and LEDIF, which is the Labor Enforcement Task Force, my DOJ background's coming in, that's more of a structured calendar sweep effort with partners under the Department of Industrial Relations, and it's with the Division of Labor Standards Enforcement, Occupational Health and Safety, EDD, and also Department of Insurance. And staff goes out roughly 2 to 3 times every other month or a couple times a month, and they will go out and do job inspections, but it's more of a structured calendar effort to partner with our agencies. And that primarily focuses on taking administrative action when we find violations. So you see there's 2 pie charts in here that shows the enforcement efforts of where the activity where we file criminal referrals versus taking administrative action. In addition to that, our SWIFT team actively participates in sting operations with partners, and in the 2014 calendar year, they did 70 sting days, which resulted in over 500 notice to appears for criminal activity. So we hope to continue to, in 2015, hopefully increase our sting activities and see more notice to appears. One other effort that we did start of last year in December was a pilot project with our LEDIF partners. We wanted to see how enforcement efforts would take place on focusing primarily on commercial job sites. So the pilot project started in December of 2014 and is scheduled to end in February of 2015. And as you can see on page 22, the results have shown that people, entities on construction sites tend to be more compliant with labor law, workers' comp activity. So I think it proved result in the benefit of that, and I think when the pilot is over, we'll probably make recommendation to resume our activity where the focus isn't primarily on commercial, but more back to the blend of the residential and commercial efforts.
Okay, that concludes your report. Is there any public comment on her report? Hearing none, we'll move to agenda item F, review and consideration of establishing operational agreements with building departments. I'd like to thank board member and Butte County Chief Building Official Nancy Springer for her work with staff to identify enhanced partnering opportunities with building departments. And that's obviously critical. Without somebody that's an actual building official, we've had a heck of a time getting a hold of them, and it's always good to have that help, and we truly appreciate it. Dave will now show the slides he is proposing for the upcoming California Building Official Annual Business Meeting in March. Of particular importance is the proposed operational agreement that building departments will need to enter into if CSLB is to continue to be effective in supporting their efforts to achieve code compliance. We're looking forward to your slide presentation. David?
Do we need to turn the light down? Or some of you that were on the board in 2010, I'm sure you recall that we had a board meeting where the board members instructed enforcement to put a very high priority on building permit compliance. And recognizing that there are over 500 building departments in this state, and we have mutual goals of ensuring construction is performed in a safe manner, we have looked for opportunities to leverage our resources and to help building departments in complying with code requirements. A little background on the enforcement penalties. You see they can be quite extreme. A civil penalty up to $5,000 can be issued for a citation for those licensed contractors that continue to violate permit requirements. In accusation, there's a specific statute that provides for suspension or revocation of the license for a one-time violation. We rarely do that. We almost always will pursue a citation with an order of correction for the contractor to return and do whatever is necessary to comply with the code requirement at that contractor's expense. After the 2010 board meeting, we developed a building department referral form. It's something we work with building officials in developing. It's proven extremely successful. This is geared towards building officials that want to report that there's a job in their jurisdiction being performed without a permit, or a contractor that didn't get the contract returned, found the work being done, maybe a roof being installed. When you check with the building department, no permit on site, or a consumer can file a complaint, and they often do so. These are some of the statistics that show the effectiveness with the program in the last 4 years. When we started out in 2010, you'll see we issued a little over 50 citations. In 2014, it was more than 200. So the staff, they've been very focused, and this is primarily relating to stand-alone sites. It's not where a consumer files a complaint. It's generally where somebody's filed a complaint arguing that there's a problem being done without a permit. If it is involved in a consumer complaint, it will have additional violations, but the permit is still critical. Now, with the success of the program and all the citations that were issued last year, we're encountering some challenges. And that's the main reason why I wanted to put this on the agenda today, is because the Attorney General's office has approached us and expressed concern about supporting the legal actions that have been taken. So why is this a problem? Well, as I mentioned, with over 500 building departments, they don't always all support our efforts. We have city attorneys and other elected officials that quite frankly are upset with the state because they look at us as being state government, which we are, and they lost redevelopment funds. They've lost resources, so they're not wanting to go out of their way to help the contractors board. Often they won't report where they have a violator, and perhaps the most important issue is at the bottom of this screen where the city attorney is telling us you need to pay $250 if you need our inspector to come down and testify that to the code requirement. And the problem here is the government, it's not just the city or county, it's the state as well. You can't pay money before services are rendered. So if a building department tells us we're not going to testify that we have an ordinance that adopts a code requirement, then we can't prevail or sustain our action because we can't pay that $250 until after the hearing. So that's a real problem. And I want to thank Nancy Springer for the research she's done and developing some answers to that problem. And what I've worked with Nancy on is developing individual operational agreements. And that's what I'm asking that you're going to consider today, whether this would have some benefit. Some of you may know that in 2006, the Contractors Board entered into a memorandum of understanding with the California building officials. That's the parent, that's like the umbrella for building officials in this state. Now, the problem, though, is most building departments don't know it exists. In fact, a lot of our staff, they don't know that it exists. So it's not effective today. And when we try to serve the subpoena and say you need to let us pay that $250 after the hearing because we got an MOU with Calbo, they kind of laugh at us. In fact, some of these building departments are not even members of Calbo, so it's not working. So with the operational agreement, what we're proposing is that if we have an agreement with the building department, we're going to provide a rapid response to complaints. That may be with one of our field investigators, or more than likely it'll be with one of our 2 enforcement reps that work in the Intake Mediation Center. That we're going to review owner-builder permits. That's a real problem where a contractor doesn't have workers' comp, maybe out of class, for whatever reason, the contractor can't get the permit. So what they do is they tell the property owner, go down and get the permit, but make sure when you fill out that application that you tell them that you don't have a contractor. You have no employees, you have no workers' comp, you have no contractor. That's a huge problem throughout the state. We want to review those. And the next slide talks about what else will we do for the building department. We're going to have our staff attend staff meetings if they're receptive to that. We'll report on our success, whether it's working or not, and if necessary, we'll support the building official, the city manager, whoever needs support at a public meeting, whether that be a city council meeting or a board of supervisors meeting. I had the opportunity to do that with Nancy and other building officials. It can be very powerful, especially when you bring in industry support. What are we asking for from the building departments? Well, first of all, we'd like for them to put our information out, our owner builder beware flyer. I mean, they should have that out readily available to a property owner that comes in and says, I'm going to go ahead and put a roof on, I'm going to remodel my house myself. We know it's not true. Here's the flyer. You need to be aware. If you hire someone that's not licensed, you become their employer. Don't take the risk. We want to make sure that they report the more egregious violators to us, and we need that timely. We might be able to catch them on site, or if not, we could perhaps still take an action. Now, this is where there may be a little bit of concern. If necessary, we need a building inspector to testify. I mentioned, though, that some of those legal actions were the result of consumer complaints. If you have a consumer complaint, you're going to have a workmanship issue. And our industry expert may be able to testify in the hearing, so you may not need their inspector. In fact, we do all we can to try to keep the inspector from having to come down and testify, but in the event we need somebody from that jurisdiction to testify, they have to be willing to agree for payment after the hearing. We can pay the $250, but it's got to be after they show up for the hearing. We're also proposing we have direct contacts. If, say, Rancho Cordova, we're close by here, there'll have somebody within the Rancho Cordova Building Department that'll be assigned as a liaison with our investigator. So we have a direct line of communication. And here are the goals. Just take a look. These are mutual goals. We don't want the work being performed in an unsafe manner. We want to make sure the contractors doing the work are complying with business practices, including the requirement that they're licensed and they're protecting their workers, that they don't misrepresent their license status, and that also the information we gather from these building departments can be used to further our efforts to partner with other state agencies to identify the contractors that are out there in the underground economy so we can focus our resources. And this is kind of hard to see on the screen. It is the last slide. In your packet, you have the operational agreement. So what I'm asking the committee to consider is permitting me to go to the California Building Official Annual Business Meeting on March the 4th to show these slides to the building officials to explain to them that if we're going to be effective in their jurisdiction next year, they're going to need to sign an operational agreement with us and be a true partner. And then depending on, well, of course, we'll find out what their response is, and then I would ask that the committee recommend to the full board that they adopt this new program. And that's it.
Are there any questions on David's presentation from the audience? From the committee? Kurt?
I would make the motion that Mr. Vogt asked for to attend the meeting and recommend to the full board to give him the authority to engage city county officials with the operational agreement in the packet.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second on the question. Are there any questions? Go ahead, Pistol.
David, this Pastor Herrera, board member, have you had any pilot? I'm sure Nancy has been a real good example with other building officials that have really kind of want to participate in this, and what has been the reaction?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, one partnership that we recently developed is with the city of Compton. Christina Delp and I had the opportunity to meet with the building official, Paige Vaughn in Compton, and we can take this a step further, because what we're doing with the city of Compton is they're identifying or dedicating one of their code enforcement officers to be available with CSLB to go out and do inspections 2 or 3 times a month. They're providing or sting sites. Some of these cities have city or county-owned property, so that can help with our sting operations. But most importantly, what the city of Compton is doing is instructing their staff to be looking for the most egregious owner-builder applications so that we can go out and investigate it together. And that's so helpful to our staff, because if we take this to the next level, we would have a code enforcement officer that's willing or able to meet us out at that project site, so our investigator is not going out alone. They now have a partner, and they have additional leverage, because if we have evidence that somebody's doing work without a permit, the building department or code enforcement could red tag that job, could help us and get testimony or information from the property owner. So yeah, absolutely.
Well, maybe you might want to add a couple, since this is going to be a marketing opportunity for you, right? Might be add a couple of slides concerning your existing partnerships too. I don't know if that would work.
The only problem is, what we've secured on March the 4th is I've got only 10 minutes to make the presentation. But the good news, so how long did I just take? Am I in trouble? 10 minutes. Okay, that's what I was trying to do. So the following day, though, Nancy was able to secure a 30-minute time slot. That's not a formal presentation in front of all the board members, but it's more of a workshop. So during that workshop, I could talk about the additional slides.
Okay, are there any other questions? Our esteemed attorney.
This is the departing attorney, so I'll take the
Departing again? We're losing the attorney?
Yeah.
What is it with us? Are we hard on you guys?
I've had all my shots and everything, so I don't understand.
Wow.
I don't understand. So in all candor,
I'm sad. Are you really leaving?
Shields will be an attorney. So in all candor, I don't want to be a wet blanket. I certainly respect all the hard work that's done before. I did want to point out a couple things. The $250 issue, I'm assuming that you issue a subpoena for the local building official. Is that how that works?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. So I just want to point out for the lawyers in the group and for the policy wonks, there's a little bit of tension. If somebody comes after a current state employee like a CSLB appointed to testify at any type of administrative proceeding, there's a $275 request fee that's needed at the time the subpoena is served. So I think respectfully, I don't want to comment on the merits. I would just say that I think legal would want to reserve some room within this to see if we can't resolve the tension between the $250 fee that's sort of paid after the fact with the current government code requirement of $275 at the time this subpoena is served. To the extent that can be waived through agreement, perhaps that isolates a problem. But I just think that going forward, I think at the next board meeting, I think legal should be given the opportunity to see if there's some way we can massage or rectify that potential conflict.
Go ahead.
This is Christy Shields, your incoming attorney. I haven't actually, this is the first time I had a chance to look at this, but the question I have for you is, do you foresee or have you provided for the exchange of information, confidential or otherwise, with respect to these partnerships? Because that should also be covered in your agreement. And we often refer to these as joint prosecution agreements. And joint prosecution agreements, there's a little more about the agreement about how you're going to share information, how you're going to keep it confidential, so that there isn't any kind of attempt to subvert what you're doing by finding out what you're talking about at these staff meetings or any information or email exchanges and things like that. So I just wondered if that had been thought about at all.
No, it hasn't been thought about. It. Perhaps
Sorry.
it should have been. But my thought is we need the application for permit, and I'm not sure if that's considered confidential, or is that, I don't know if anybody, I don't know if she can't speak to it, but I don't believe that it is. So from what we need from them would be the application for permit, and what we would provide to them would only be public information.
Counselor, are you happy?
I said I haven't had, this is the first time I've had a chance to look at this, so I would like some leeway from the committee to look at it and see if there's anything else that could be suggested to tighten it up or clarify things.
Yeah, we would very much appreciate any input that you would have on the operational agreements. Any way we can improve upon them, absolutely. In fact, you might want to take a look at the MOU that's currently in place between the Contractors Board and California building officials. We can forward that to you.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, we have a motion and a second before the board. We have to, and we're going to proceed to vote. I'd like to ask you to raise your right hand as I ask all in favor of the motion. It's okay. You're new, and we're going to let you stay. Cause we don't want to be too hard on you because we're apparently really hard on attorneys around here. So, and I know that as a woman, she's going to be a lot tougher than you. But that's just my personal opinion. Good job, Kelsey. Okay, we're going to go ahead and proceed to vote. All those in favor of the motion, raise your right hand. Okay. All those opposed, raise your right hand. All those abstaining, raise your right hand. Okay, the motion carries. Okay, do you want to do this now?
Yes.
Okay, we're going to jump off topic here just a little bit. I'm going to go back a little in your agenda, and we're going to have. The committee would like to recognize Mr. Dave Long, Deputy Labor Commissioner for the Department of Industrial Relations Division of State Standards Enforcement, who has made himself indispensable to CSLB SWIFT as a member of the Labor Enforcement Task Force. Mr. Long's services as a translator and partner in the field have strengthened our dual mission of combating the underground economy. Thank you, Mr. Long. Would you like? Oh, there he is. Okay, as I was sharing with him, I'm from Southern California, and Little Saigon's in Westminster was right down the street from my office, actually, and we had several from the Vietnamese community come to my local union and apply, and they are some of the hardest working people in the community I've ever met. I mean, just really enjoyed having them with them, and to be able to communicate with them would have been a real plus. And luckily, I had a priest, a Vietnamese priest, that would help me with that. And it really helped a lot. So I know how important that is. The communication is absolutely vital. So thank you very much. Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to agenda item G, Special Investigative Unit Update. Enforcement was very fortunate to welcome our first Special Investigation Unit Supervisor, John Bruce, on November 30th, 2014. With more than 15 years law enforcement and CSLB experience, Mr. Bruce is uniquely qualified to lead the CSLB peace officers. John will brief the committee on peace officer training, investigation focus, and law enforcement partnering opportunities. John?
Thank you. We are, as far as the progress of the investigation unit, we're fully staffed now, except for we got a couple more openings. The training will be going to go for, I guess, networking will be our number one object right now, is to do more networking with law enforcement agencies. We want to do some training as far as different operations like search warrants, things of that nature with the unit. And whatever other training we look at, we want to have a unit that's second to none as far as being professional operatives in the business, so we're looking forward to doing that. We've already made contact with a couple of law enforcement agencies. Los Angeles District Attorney's Office is one in particular that we're trying to make some contact with. Already had a couple of contacts with them asking for our help in search warrants and things of that nature. We're going to be reaching out to them. Also going to be doing some outreach with other senior citizen groups and things of that nature. Let them know. Biggest thing we want to do is let the public know we're here. Let you know if you do wrong, we're going to be out there looking for you. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much, Mr. Bruce. Can I ask a favor? The law enforcement, all the peace officers in the audience, would you please stand and introduce yourself? We'll start on the right here. And where you're from, too, please.
Peter Callan, Special Investigation Unit, I'm at the San Francisco office.
Welcome, Peter.
John Anderson, I'm out of the San Bernardino office, been with the board for going on 15 years, and started off as a regular enforcement representative. I've been in the SWIP for about 3 years, and finally decided to get involved with the peace officer unit. And it's a real opportunity and a privilege to be working with this group of people here. And we're able to make a difference in ways we haven't as much in the past with some of the laws we're now really enforcing. And I think it's going to make a great difference in the future moving forward.
Great. Welcome.
Shelby Brooks. I work at the Valencia Investigation Center. I've been with the department for a little over 2 years, and my prior work was working as a parole agent for approximately 5 years with Department of Corrections.
Welcome.
Eugene Controller, Peace Officer. I'm out of the Norwalk office for 16 months. I came from parole. I was there 6.5 years.
Deidre Green, I'm a peace officer out of the Norwalk office. I also came from parole, and I'm just looking forward to fighting crime.
We know you are, Deidre. I know you very well, actually. You were very good at your job, too. It was great. Thank you very much.
I'm Hugh Henderson. I'm a peace officer investigator out here at the headquarters, Sacramento. I've been here about 16 months as well, and I transferred over from corrections. I have a background as a youth correctional counselor and as a correctional officer. I came over and a training and development assignment as a correctional officer, and that was terminated. So Cslb brought me in full time. So now I'm on board as a peace officer investigator.
Very good. Thank you very much. Give them a round of applause, please. Thank you for all you do for CSLB. It's truly, truly appreciated by this committee, and I know by the full board especially. And as the chair of the enforcement committee for the second time in 10 years, I really, really appreciate it. I came back for more just because of you. I really do appreciate everything you do. Thank you very much. Okay, is there any public comment on the Special Investigation Unit update? Hearing none, we'll continue on to agenda item H, adjournment. Do I have an motion to adjourn? Yep. Unless there's any questions or any further public comment, we stand adjourned. A motion to adjourn is always in order. A motion to adjourn.